I had barely made it past the brass doors of the Cedar Ridge Country Club when I heard her laugh and say, "Well, would you look at that? The oil change man owns a necktie." She did not say it to my face. People like that rarely do. She said it sideways, into a crystal glass, just loud enough for the women beside her to turn and smile at my shoes. I looked down like a fool, even though I already knew they were clean. I had spent 20 minutes at my kitchen table that afternoon polishing them with an old rag because my son had asked me to come to the most important night of his life, and I wanted to look like I belonged beside him. For a second, I could not move. I was 67 years old, with a pressed gray suit, a hand-me-down tie from my brother, and fingers that still smelled faintly of motor oil no matter how hard I scrubbed them. I had worked all my life. I had paid my bills. I had raised my boy. But one sentence from a rich woman with perfect teeth made me feel like I was standing outside the principal's office in muddy boots. And the worst part was, that woman was supposed to become my son's mother-in-law. I turned toward the exit. I truly did. I had no speech prepared. No angry comeback. No dramatic moment. I just thought, let them have their chandelier room and their silver forks. I'll go home, make coffee, sit beside my wife, and pretend this night never happened. Then my son Noah appeared out of nowhere. He caught my sleeve with one hand and stepped close enough that no one else could hear. "Dad," he whispered, his voice low and steady. "Give me 1 hour. Don't leave before the toast." I looked at him. There was no embarrassment in his face, no apology, no panic, just something hard and clear behind his eyes, something I had not seen since he was 17 and stood between a bully and a smaller kid outside the grocery store. "Noah," I said quietly, "what have you done?" He squeezed my arm once. "What I should have done sooner. My name is Walter Harlan, though most people call me Walt. I have lived outside Franklin, Tennessee, almost my whole life. Not the polished Franklin people see in magazines now, with boutiques, coffee shops, and houses that sell for more than a man used to make in 10 lifetimes. I mean the older Franklin, where roads ran past hayfields, where a handshake was still worth something, where men stood around open hoods on Saturday mornings and argued about transmissions like they were discussing scripture. For 41 years, I ran Harlan Auto and Welding on a narrow piece of land off Old Mill Pike. My father opened that shop in 1968 with 2 lifts, a compressor that sounded like a dying tractor, and a sign he painted himself. I started sweeping floors there when I was 9. By 12, I could change oil. By 16, I could rebuild a carburetor with my eyes half closed. By 22, I was married to Ruth Ann, and by 25, I had a baby boy sleeping in a wooden crib in the little room behind the office while I worked late nights to keep the lights on. That boy was Noah. Noah grew up around sockets, invoices, welding masks, and men who told stories while they waited for their trucks. He was never ashamed of it. Even when he went off to Georgia Tech and came back with an engineering degree, he still called the shop home base. He could sit across from executives in Atlanta on a Wednesday and crawl under an old Ford with me on Saturday without acting like one world was better than the other. That was one thing Ruth Ann and I did right. Ruth Ann is still with me, thank God. She has arthritis in both knees, one hip that complains before it rains, and a laugh that can still straighten my spine from the next room. She could not come to the country club that night because she was recovering from surgery, but she ironed my shirt anyway, sitting at the kitchen table, fussing over my collar like we were both 30 again. "Don't let them make you feel small," she told me. I kissed the top of her head and said, "At my age, I'm already shrinking." She pointed the iron at me. "You know what I mean, Walt." I did. The Whitcombs had that effect on people. Noah met Lydia Whitcomb at a transportation planning conference in Nashville. She was polished, pretty, and educated in the way wealthy people are educated, not just schools, but posture, vocabulary, timing. She worked for her family's nonprofit, the Whitcomb Civic Trust, which claimed to build community spaces in neighborhoods left behind by progress. That was how their brochure put it. Her father, Grant Whitcomb, was a developer who had spent 30 years buying land before other people realized they wanted it. Her mother, Marlene, chaired committees, hosted fundraisers, and spoke in a soft voice that somehow made every sentence sound like a verdict. The first time I met them was at a restaurant where the napkins were folded like birds. Grant shook my hand and looked at my knuckles. Marlene asked if I was still tinkering with cars, as though my shop was a hobby I might outgrow. Lydia smiled too much. That was the first thing Ruth Ann noticed when Noah brought her home for Sunday supper. She smiles like a woman taking notes, Ruth said afterward. I told her she was being hard on the girl. Ruth shrugged. I hope I'm wrong. For nearly 2 years I tried to like Lydia. I truly did. She was never openly cruel in front of Noah. That would have been too easy to spot. Instead, she corrected small things. The way I said a word. The way I held my fork. The way my house smelled like sawdust because I had been building shelves in the garage. She once told Noah, right in my kitchen, that my place had authentic, working-class texture. I thought she meant it kindly, until I saw Ruth Ann's face. Still, Noah loved her, or believed he did. And when your grown child is walking toward a life, you have to learn the difference between warning and pulling. Too much pulling, and they run farther. So, I stayed quiet. The night at Cedar Ridge was supposed to be a joint celebration, a fundraising gala for the Whitcomb Civic Trust, and the formal announcement of Noah and Lydia's engagement. 2 birds, 1 chandelier. There were maybe 150 people there, donors, developers, city council types, foundation board members, a few of Noah's friends, and a handful of relatives from our side who looked about as comfortable as ducks in church shoes. I had come alone because Ruth could not stand that long. I walked in carrying a small envelope in my inside pocket. It held a letter Ruth had written to Noah and Lydia, a blessing for their marriage. She had cried while writing it. That is the kind of woman my Ruth is. Even when she had doubts, she chose grace first. Then Marlene Whitcomb looked at me from beneath a crystal chandelier and called me the oil change man. I almost left with my wife's letter still in my pocket. But Noah asked me for 1 hour, so I stayed. I stood through the welcome drinks. I shook hands with men who glanced past me while I spoke. I let a woman named Bitsy ask whether I had ever considered selling that little garage now that the area is improving. I watched Lydia float around the room in a white dress that was not a wedding dress, but was close. Enough to remind everyone what was coming. She kissed cheeks. She touched arms. She laughed with her head tilted back at the exact angle women use when they know they are being photographed. Every few minutes I looked at Noah. He was calm. Too calm. He stood near the stage where a podium had been set up beneath a screen. On that screen was the Whitcomb Civic Trust logo, a green bridge over 2 open hands. Beneath it were the words "Building Tomorrow Together." Funny thing about words like together, they sound beautiful until you learn who is expected to give and who is expected to own. About halfway through dinner, I saw Grant Whitcomb place a hand on Noah's shoulder. Grant leaned in, smiling like a man offering fatherly advice, and said something I could not hear. Noah nodded once. Lydia watched from a few feet away, lips tight, eyes sharp. Then Noah turned and looked right at me. He did not smile. He just gave me the smallest nod. That was when I knew this was not about one insult. Something had been moving beneath the floorboards for a long time, and I was only now hearing the creak. I found out later how it started. 3 weeks before the gala, Noah had gone to Lydia's parents' house for dinner. Grant had been drinking bourbon in his study. Lydia had asked Noah to grab her phone charger from the hallway table, and while he was there, he heard my name. Not Mr. Harlan. Not Walt. Harlan Parcel. Those 2 words stopped him. Noah told me later he did not mean to listen at first. Then he heard Lydia say, "Daddy, if we wait until after the wedding, he might get stubborn. Walt trusts Noah now." Use that. Noah took out his phone and started recording. That first recording was only 46 seconds long, but it was enough to make the ground tilt under his feet. Grant said the medical campus expansion was moving faster than expected. A private surgical group wanted land for a parking structure and outpatient center. My little shop sat on a corner they needed badly, along with 2 adjoining lots already under option. If they could get me to donate the property to the Whitcomb Civic Trust for a vocational training center, the trust could hold it 6 months, transfer it through one of Grant's development companies, and pocket the difference as administrative reinvestment. Marlene asked, "And Walter thinks it becomes a trade school?" Grant laughed. "He thinks whatever Noah tells him to think." That was the sentence that changed my son. Not the money, not even the plan. That sentence. For 3 weeks, Noah did what patient people do when they stop forgiving. He listened. He documented. He copied emails Lydia left open on her laptop. He photographed a folder labeled Harlan Initiative. He found draft donation agreements with my name already typed beneath a signature line. He found a letter, supposedly from me, stating that I was ready to retire and eager for the Whitcomb Civic Trust to preserve my family's legacy. He found minutes from a board meeting I had never attended, claiming I had given verbal consent. Most importantly, he found the plan for the gala. Near the end of the evening, Grant and Marlene were going to call me on stage for a surprise tribute. They would praise my generosity, hand me a ceremonial pen, and ask me to sign what they described as a non-binding letter of intent. Under the pressure of a room full of clapping donors, with my son standing beside his fiancée, they expected me to sign. But the paper was not non-binding. Noah had taken the documents to a real estate attorney named Denise Alvarez, who had once been one of Ruth Ann's students back when Ruth taught 5th grade. Denise reviewed everything, contacted a state investigator who specialized in charity fraud, and helped Noah prepare his own surprise. That was what he meant when he said, "Don't leave before the toast." I did not know any of that while I sat at table 19, eating chicken too fancy to taste like chicken. I only knew my son was waiting. After dinner, Grant stepped onto the stage. He had one of those voices that never needed a microphone, but used one anyway. "Friends," he began, "tonight is about community, legacy, and the sacred responsibility of those who have been blessed to lift up those who have been overlooked." People nodded like he had said something deep. He spoke for 8 minutes, maybe 10. He talked about opportunity, dignity, bridges, neighborhoods, workforce development. He used the word humble 3 times and never once looked humble while saying it. Then Marlene joined him, one hand over her heart. "And tonight," she said, "we have the privilege of honoring a man whose family has occupied a small but meaningful corner of this county for generations." Occupied. That was the word she chose. Not served, not worked, not built, occupied. I felt my face warming before she even said my name. "Mr. Walter Harlan," she continued, smiling down at me, "would you please join us?" Every eye turned. My knees did not want to stand, but I made them. I walked between the tables with the same care I used crossing icy pavement. Somewhere behind me, my niece whispered, "Uncle Walt?" I kept going. Noah stepped onto the stage from the side. Lydia followed him, beaming, though her eyes flicked toward him once like she was checking a lock. Grant shook my hand for the room. Marlene kissed the air beside my cheek. Lydia touched my arm and said, "This means so much to us. To us, not to me, not to the community. Us." Grant gestured toward the screen behind us. A photograph appeared. My father in front of the shop in 1972, holding a wrench, grinning like a man who had no idea his son would one day stand in a country club watching strangers try to steal what he built. My throat tightened. Then another photograph appeared. Me at 30, Noah at 4, both of us sitting on the hood of a tow truck. The room made a soft sound, the kind people make when they see something old and simple and think it is charming. Grant placed a folder on the podium. "Walter," he said, "your family's property can become the cornerstone of a new training center for young men and women seeking honest work. Tonight, we invite you to take the first step in preserving that legacy forever." People began clapping. Not loud, not yet, but enough to create a current pushing me toward that folder. Grant opened it. A pen lay across the page. I looked at Noah. He stepped closer. For one terrible second, I thought he might ask me to sign. Not because he wanted to hurt me, but because love can make fools of the best of us. I thought maybe Lydia had convinced him. Maybe I had misread that look in his eyes. Maybe my boy was caught too deep. Then Noah took the microphone from Grant's hand. The room quieted. "My father is not signing anything tonight," Noah said. The clapping died in pieces. Grant's smile held for half a second too long. Noah turned toward the audience. "But since Mr. Whitcomb brought up legacy, I think everyone in this room deserves to understand what he means by that word." Lydia's face changed first. It was quick, but I saw it. The smile vanished, then came back wrong. "Noah," she said softly, still trying to sound playful. "Honey, not now." Noah did not look at her. "Especially the donors," he said, "and the board members, and the young people whose futures were used as decoration for a real estate deal." Marlene whispered, "Grant." Grant reached for the microphone, but Noah stepped back. The screen behind us went black. Then a new image appeared. Not the Whitcomb logo, a scanned document with my name at the top. The title read, "Irrevocable Property Transfer Agreement." The room shifted. Chairs creaked. Someone coughed once and stopped. Noah's voice stayed even. This document was prepared by Whitcomb Development Partners 6 weeks ago. My father has never seen it. He did not authorize it. He did not attend the board meeting referenced here. And he did not agree to donate his property. Grant laughed, but there was no air in it. This is absurd, he said. This is a private family misunderstanding. Noah clicked a small remote in his hand. The first recording played. Grant's voice filled the room, smooth and unmistakable. If we put Walt on stage, he won't embarrass his son by refusing. Men like him are trained to be grateful when people like us include them. I felt something inside me go still. Not break. Still. Marlene's hand flew to her throat. Lydia said, "That is out of context." Noah clicked again. Lydia's voice came next, clear as a bell. "Daddy, just make sure the real papers are under the tribute letter. He won't read them with everybody watching. He'll sign because Noah asks him to." You could feel the room understand, not all at once, more like a stain spreading through cloth. A man at a front table leaned back slowly. A woman who had been smiling at Lydia all evening put her glass down. One of the foundation board members stood, then sat back down as if her legs had changed their mind. Grant moved toward the laptop at the side of the stage. "Noah," he snapped, no longer pretending. "Turn it off." Noah looked at him then. "You called my father small," he said. "You built a whole plan on him being too polite to defend himself. You were wrong." The next slide showed emails, dates, attachments, a spreadsheet titled Acquisition Sequence, a projected resale value nearly 6 times what the shop was worth on paper, a line item labeled Donor Optics. Donor Optics. That was me. An optic. Marlene tried to speak to the room. "We have spent our lives serving this community," she said, voice trembling. "This young man is angry. He is emotional. He is twisting internal planning documents." Noah clicked again. Marlene's own voice came from the speakers. "I don't care what story we tell afterward. Call it a training center, call it a memorial, call it whatever keeps the donors warm. Grant needs the parcel clean before the hospital group walks." No one moved. Even the waitstaff froze along the wall. Lydia turned to me then. Not to Noah. To me. "Walt," she said, crying suddenly. "You know I would never hurt you. Please tell him." That was the first time in 2 years she had said my name like it belonged to a person. I looked at her for a long moment, and I thought about all the times I had swallowed little cuts because I did not want to trouble my son. I thought about Ruth Ann ironing my shirt. I thought about my father painting that sign in 1968. I thought about every young man I had hired because nobody else would give him a chance. Boys with records, boys with no fathers, boys who learned to show up on time because I told them somebody was counting on them. Then I said, "Lydia, I think you've said enough for both of us." Her crying changed. It got louder, sharper, less sad than angry. Grant lunged toward Noah. Before he reached him, 2 men from the back of the room stepped forward. Not security guards. One was a state investigator named Paul Mercer. The other was our attorney, Denise Alvarez, in a navy suit and heels that sounded like a judge's gavel on the wooden floor. Denise took the microphone Noah offered her. "My name is Denise Alvarez," she said. "I represent Mr. Walter Harlan. Copies of these documents, recordings, and related communications were delivered this afternoon to the appropriate state and county offices. Mr. Harlan will not be signing any transfer tonight. Any attempt to represent otherwise will be met with immediate legal action." Then Paul Mercer held up a badge just long enough for the front tables to see. "I advise the Whitcomb family not to destroy records, leave with foundation materials, or contact potential witnesses before we speak." That was when Lydia started screaming, not crying, screaming. At Noah first, then at her father, then at me. "You ruined everything," she shouted. Noah looked at her, and for the first time all night his face showed pain. "No," he said quietly. "You just found out I wasn't for sale." That line went through me harder than any insult Marlene had thrown, because I knew what it cost him. People talk about revenge like it is fire and triumph. Sometimes it is. But sometimes it is your son standing 10 feet away from the woman he planned to marry, watching the life he imagined burn down because truth matters more than comfort. I wanted to put my arm around him, but I knew he needed to stand on his own in that moment. Grant tried one more time to take control. This family is finished in this town, he barked, pointing at Noah and then me. You think you can humiliate us and walk away clean? A voice from the crowd answered before either of us could. Grant, sit down. It was Mayor Pritchard, who had smiled beside Grant in more newspaper photos than I could count. His face was pale. He looked toward Denise and the investigator, then toward the board members. I want my name removed from every Whitcomb Civic Trust document by morning. That was the second crack. Then came another. A donor stood and asked for her pledge card back. A contractor near the bar said he had emails too. A woman from the nonprofit's advisory board began crying and saying she had warned them about restricted funds. Someone else said, "What hospital group? Phones were out now. Not gossip phones. Evidence phones." The room Grant Whitcomb had filled with people to admire him became the room where they watched him shrink. And I will tell you the truth, friends. I did not feel proud in the way people might expect. I did not feel like cheering. I felt tired. I felt relieved. I felt angry at how close they had come. But most of all, I felt seen. That may sound small, but if you have ever been treated like the help at a table you were invited to, you understand. There is a special loneliness in being dismissed by people who need what you built, but despise the hands that built it. That night, for once, the room looked at the hands. Within 20 minutes, the gala was over in every official sense. The band packed quietly. The photographer disappeared. Half the guests left in tight little groups, whispering into phones. Grant, Marlene, and Lydia were escorted to a side room with Denise, the investigator, and two uniformed officers who had been waiting outside after Denise called ahead. Nobody was dragged out in handcuffs that night. Real life is not always that tidy, but their faces told me they understood the future had changed. Noah came down from the stage and stood in front of me. For a second, he was not 34. He was 7, holding a broken toy truck, asking if I could fix it. "I'm sorry, Dad," he said. I shook my head. "You didn't do this. I brought them into our life." "You brought love into your life," I said. "They brought lies into it." His mouth trembled once, but he held himself together. Then my sister Carol marched up, 5'2" and dangerous in church pearls, and wrapped Noah in a hug so hard he made a sound like a squeezed accordion. After that, something strange happened. The food was still there. Trays of roast beef, potatoes, green beans, rolls, little desserts with gold flakes on top. All paid for by Whitcomb money meant to impress Whitcomb people. My nephew Marcus looked at the buffet and said, "Seems sinful to waste it." For the first time all night, Noah laughed. So we ate. Not the whole room, not the people who came to be photographed beside Grant. But our people stayed. Noah's college friends stayed. A few Foundation employees stayed, looking shaken but grateful. 2 young mechanics from my shop, boys I had hired after they graduated from the county trade program, showed up late because they had closed for me that evening. When they heard what happened, they came straight in wearing work shirts with their names stitched over the pockets. Nobody asked them to leave. That was my favorite part. We moved 3 tables together near the back of the ballroom. Somebody turned the music back on low. My niece took off her shoes. Carol stole a centerpiece. Noah sat beside me, quiet but breathing. I called Ruth Ann from the hallway and told her the short version. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Put my son on the phone." I handed it to Noah. He turned away, and I watched his shoulders start to shake. Ruth has that power. She can find the child inside a grown man with one sentence. Later, he told me, she said, "I am sorry your heart broke tonight, baby, but I am proud your backbone held." I keep that line close. The weeks after Cedar Ridge were uglier than the night itself. Investigations usually are. The Whitcomb Civic Trust shut down operations within a month. Restricted donations had been moved through accounts they were never supposed to touch. The community projects, in 3 neighborhoods, were mostly signs, press releases, and empty lots. Grant's development company had been using the nonprofit as a friendly face for deals that would have looked greedy if presented honestly. My shop was not their first target. That knowledge did something to me. At first, I had thought the story was about my land, my family, my humiliation. Then people started coming forward. A widow who had signed away an option on her duplex after Grant promised a community garden. A retired pastor whose church parking lot had been tied up in a temporary access agreement that turned out not to be temporary. a young nonprofit director who had been pressured to put Whitcomb people on her board. They had been hunting behind Smiles for years. The criminal charges came later: fraud, conspiracy, forgery, misuse of charitable funds, and a list of financial crimes that sounded dry until you met the people underneath them. Grant's lawyers tried to say it was complicated business. Marlene's lawyers said she was only a volunteer. Lydia's lawyers said she had been under her father's influence. Maybe parts of that were true. People can be guilty and still have reasons. But reasons are not erasers. Noah testified for almost 4 hours. He did not exaggerate. He did not perform. He answered every question with the same steadiness he had shown on that stage. When Lydia's attorney asked if he had exposed her publicly out of bitterness, Noah looked tired. "No," he said. "I exposed her publicly because she intended to use the public to pressure my father into signing. I stopped the lie in the same room where they planned to sell it." That answer made the courtroom quiet. I testified too. My hands shook more than I wanted them to. The defense asked whether I had read every document ever given to me in my life. They asked whether I trusted my son. They asked whether I understood property transfers and nonprofit structures. At one point, Grant's attorney said, "Mr. Harlan, isn't it fair to say you are not a sophisticated businessman?" I looked at the jury. Then I looked back at him. "I ran a repair shop for 41 years, I said. "I kept 12 families paid through 2 recessions, 3 floods, and a pandemic. I know when somebody is trying to cheat me." One juror smiled before she could stop herself. In the end, Grant took a plea when more victims came forward. He served time, not as much as some folks wanted, but enough to strip the shine off his name. Marlene received house arrest, probation, and a ban from serving on charitable boards. Lydia avoided prison by cooperating, but she lost her job, her social circle, and the future she had tried to build on borrowed dignity. Some people said Noah should have taken a private settlement. There was one, $400,000, and a written apology in exchange for silence before charges expanded. I will not pretend I did not think about it. $400,000 is not pocket change to a man who has replaced the same roof twice and still checks grocery prices. Ruth Ann and I could have used that money. Noah could have used it too. But there are checks that feel like hush money even when the paper is clean. We said no. Not because we were noble every minute. We were angry. We were hurt. We were tired. But we knew that if we took the money and disappeared, the next Walter Harlan might be standing under another chandelier with a pen in his hand, wondering why the room was clapping. The shop is still mine. I do not work full-time anymore. My back has opinions now, and my knees agree with Ruth's more than I like. But 3 mornings a week, I unlock the doors before sunrise. The sign my father painted hangs inside now because weather finally got to it. We made a new one for out front, Harlan Auto and Training Garage. That was Noah's idea. After everything settled, he left the big consulting firm where he had been working 80-hour weeks making rich men's mistakes look mathematically sound. He now teaches part-time at the community college and runs a training program out of the second bay at the shop. Young people come in 2 evenings a week to learn brakes, welding basics, diagnostics, and the simple discipline of putting tools back where they belong. Ruth Ann brings cookies when she feels up to it. She pretends they are for the students, but we all know they are mostly for Noah. He did not date for a long while. I did not ask. A father learns when to leave a quiet room quiet. Then one spring, he brought a woman named Rachel by the shop. She wore jeans, laughed with her whole face, and asked me whether the old compressor in the corner still worked or was just there for atmosphere. I liked her immediately. She teaches high school agriculture and has never once used the word humble as a decoration. They are taking their time. Good. Time reveals what charm hides. Every now and then, people ask whether I regret letting Noah expose the Whitcombs in front of everyone. They ask if it was too harsh, too public, too humiliating. Here is what I believe, friends. If someone builds a lie in public, they do not get to demand privacy when the truth arrives. I do not mean every hurt needs a stage. Most don't. Some things should be handled gently, quietly, with mercy. But when people use a room full of witnesses as a weapon, when they count on your manners to trap you, when they mistake your decency for weakness, then letting the truth speak is not cruelty. It is protection. Marlene called me the oil change man because she needed me beneath her. Grant called my life's work a parcel because land is easier to steal when you stop seeing the hands that kept it alive. Lydia believed Noah would choose polish over principle because she had been raised around people who did that every day. They were wrong about him. That is the part I carry with pride. Not the courtroom, not the headlines, not Grant Whitcomb losing his smile under fluorescent lights. My son saw me being made small, and instead of looking away, he stood taller. A man can leave many things behind: a building, a business, a toolbox with his initials burned into the handle. But the real inheritance is what your children do when the world offers them comfort in exchange for their character. Noah gave me my answer under a chandelier in a room where I almost walked out. So before you go, I want to ask you something, family. Type a 1 if you think Noah was right to expose them publicly at the gala, right there in front of the donors and board members. Type a 2 if you would have taken the $400,000 settlement and walked away. That is real money, and I will not shame anybody for being honest. Type a 3 if you would have left the moment Marlene made that joke and never given them another minute of your life. And tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I always like knowing where a story lands. Maybe you are in Michigan after midnight, or Georgia before dinner, or sitting somewhere with coffee gone cold because one line reminded you of a room where somebody once made you feel smaller than you were. If that is you, hear me. You were never small. You were just standing too close to people who needed you to believe you were. Sometimes the bravest thing a family can do is stand quietly together until the truth has room to speak. Walt did not need wealth to be worthy, and Noah did not need applause to be loyal. When love protects dignity, even a hard night can become a doorway to healing, courage, and a kinder tomorrow.